Hey guys, still going to be taking a look at why the 2022 midterms are not going to be the red wave that Republicans had hoped and anticipated for. And a big sign of this are the two special elections that were held earlier this month. We have first the one in New York where Pat Ryan did surprisingly well and actually won this race. So you had a Democrat running against a Republican in a swing district. This was a district that Trump won by 7 points in 2016 and Biden won by 2 points in 2020. And Pat Ryan actually outperformed Joe Biden in this district in the special election. And this really is a big deal for Democrats. I mean, these special election wins for the Democratic Party have been a big boost to their morale, and they are a sign in many cases as to what is going to happen in the midterms, which are now less than 3 months away. So if you do look at the polls for this race, Democrats did much better than expected. They were expected to lose according to every single poll that was done for this special election. And this special election was done to fill the seat vacated by Antonio Delgado, who went on to become the lieutenant governor of New York under Kathy Hochul. So if we do look at the past election results in this district, you will see that Trump carried it in 2016, but then lost it by a very narrow margin in 2020. And just looking at the results from recent presidential elections, you will see this district has been very competitive. And in a year like 2022, Democrats should not be winning this district. Pat Ryan should not have won this race if we're going to see anything like a red wave in November. And Pat Ryan is not some legendary candidate that Democrats found and plucked into this race. He's virtually unknown across the country, and he made abortion rights a major issue of his campaign. That was basically what won him this race. Even though reproductive rights in New York were not going to change either way, New York is a very liberal state, Pat Ryan was able to make a huge campaign about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and that ended up working for him. And so if we do look at the elections in November, Democrats are doing this in many closer races, and in many races that abortion rights may actually have an effect on. So if you look at the toss-up races that we have in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, in both of these states, I mean, if Republicans are elected to major statewide offices, abortion rights are probably going to be taken away. We also see a very similar pattern in Georgia, North Carolina, as well as Arizona. So in these races, abortion rights are going to matter more than they did in the New York race, and people who say that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is going to help Republicans are simply not right. If you look at the Kansas referendum on abortion, even Kansas voted 60-40 to not ban the right to abortion for women in the state. So if we do look at the big picture here, yes, abortions are not going to be a major issue to most people. Only about 8% of Americans view abortion rights as their biggest voting issue, but 8% in one of these key races is going to make a really big difference. And earlier this month, we had another special election, this time in Minnesota, for the 1st Congressional District seat in the U.S. House. And yes, Brad Finstad, the Republican, did end up winning against Jeff Ettinger, but Ettinger outperformed Joe Biden by 6% in this race. If you look at the 2020 presidential election in Minnesota's 1st Congressional District, Joe Biden lost the district by 10% to Donald Trump in 2020. This is a red district. Overall, Republicans have been doing very well here in the last couple of elections. In 2016, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton by 15% in this district. It was a solid margin for the former president, and so Jeff Ettinger getting within 4% of Brad Finstad really was a big deal, especially in a year like 2022. If you looked at Biden's approval rating a couple of weeks ago, I mean, it was pretty abysmal, so Jeff Ettinger definitely outperformed expectations. If you looked at the polls, Finstad was expected to win by 8% according to the final Survey USA poll. This is an A-rated pollster, and even Jeff Ettinger's own campaign had Finstad winning by 1%. So this was another overperformance for Democrats. Definitely underestimated these Democratic candidates in these races. And so with the Democrats outperforming polling expectations, again, we're just not going to see a red wave year in 2022. We may see a red ripple. That's what a lot of people are calling it. Republicans are still going to do better than they did in 2020. I'm not trying to say that Democrats are going to outperform their wins in the last election, but definitely we're not going to see some huge shift to the right just after November. And so looking at generic ballot numbers right now, Democrats are leading by 0.4% nationwide, with 44% to the Republicans' 43.6%. Now, this is nothing like what we're seeing in the previous two elections. In 2020, Democrats were up by 7.3% on Election Day, and in 2018, they were up by a margin of 8.6%, and both times Democrats were at the 50% mark. So Republicans are still probably going to narrowly win the popular vote, and they're still probably going to do better than they did in both 2018 and 2020, but 2022 is not going to be a wave year like we saw in 2018 for the Democrats or Republicans in 2010 and 2014. So looking at the 2018 elections, 235 seats for Democrats, 194 in 2016. So from 2016 to 2018, 2018 was a big wave year for Democrats. They flipped 41 seats in just one night. In 2012, going to 2014, we also saw a major gain for Republicans on the House level, and of course in the Senate in 2014, this was the first time they won the Senate after the election of Barack Obama. It took Republicans 6 years to win back the Senate after Obama was elected president in 2008 with 59 Senate seats. In 2010, we also saw a major flip for Republicans, 242 seats in the House. In 2010, they only won 178. So 2010 was probably the biggest wave year we've seen in recent history, and 2022 is not going to be anything like these types of years. And so, if anything is major is going to happen this year, it's probably going to happen in the House. For the most part, the Senate is going to stay relatively the same. Democrats may hold on to the majority with their 50 seats. They may expand by one seat, or Republicans may actually gain one seat. But we're just going to have to see. The House is going to be much more fluid than the Senate. In the House elections, we're seeing a pretty big shift in favor of the Republicans overall from 2020. If you look at these House races, partisanship matters a lot more. Voters are much more likely to vote for a candidate based on their political party affiliation than in a Senate election. Senate elections are simply different. They're statewide, and of course, like Mitch McConnell said, candidate quality matters a lot. And so if you look at the House elections according to 538, they only have Republicans winning around 230 seats. They need 218 for a majority. So 230 would not be a big majority at all, and it would really only be like a 20-seat gain for the Republican Party, less than a 20-seat gain. That is not what you would call a red wave. Even if you look at the Senate races, Republicans are likely to gain even less. Looking at the 538 forecast for the Senate, Democrats actually have a 64% chance at retaining their majority. So Republicans can't even win back the Senate. 2022 is not going to be a red wave at all. And I mean, this map is very favorable for Republicans. If you look at the 2018 map for the Senate, yes, 2018 was a red wave, but Republicans actually expanded upon their Senate majority. But if you do look at the 2018 map, I mean, it was a very good map for the GOP. If you look at the states that were flipped, North Dakota, Missouri, and Indiana were almost guaranteed for the GOP. Donald Trump won all three of these states by solid margins in 2016. Democrats flipped Nevada and Arizona. The only major win for the GOP in 2018 was in Florida, where Rick Scott won by 0.1%. And if you look at the states that Democrats had to defend, they were able to win in West Virginia, Ohio, as well as Montana. And Texas was only a 2-point margin between Cruz and O'Rourke. So 2018, it was still a very good year for Democrats overall, even though they did not make any gains in the Senate. But in 2022, Republicans should be able to win the majority, especially considering the fact that right now we have a 50-50 Senate. In 2018, things were much different. After 2016, Republicans held a much stronger majority. And even looking at Joe Biden's approval numbers, we're seeing an uptick for Democrats. Joe Biden is now only 13 points underwater, which is still obviously not good at all. But if we do look at his numbers compared to a couple of months ago, Joe Biden is doing pretty well for the first time since all the way back in early June. Joe Biden's approval rating is over 40%. Currently is, of course, 13 points underwater. At one point in time a month ago, Joe Biden was 20 points underwater if you take his approval rating and subtract his disapproval rating. And so if we do look at the overall Senate map right now, the main reason why I think that we're not seeing this red wave is not because Republicans are unpopular nationwide. They're doing 8 points better than they were in 2018. And also, Joe Biden is not some sort of great president. He's not just becoming a great leader for our country or something like that. Most people still feel, an overwhelming majority of people still feel, that the United States is going in the wrong direction. But if you look at the candidates that Republicans are fielding in many of these races, you will see why they're performing so terribly. We have Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. I mean, John Fetterman, yes, he's overall a pretty good candidate, but if we had just a generic Republican running in the state, we would see a red Pennsylvania right now. In Arizona, Blake Masters is not as bad as I would say Mehmet Oz or Herschel Walker, but he is not helping the Republicans' cause at winning back the Senate. Blake Masters is probably going to lose to Mark Kelly. If you look at the 530 forecast, I mean, it heavily skews in favor of the Democratic incumbent. Mark Kelly has a 70% chance at winning, according to this forecast. It's almost a likely Democratic state, according to 530. In Pennsylvania, John Fetterman has a 73% chance at defeating Oz. And of course, in Georgia, Raphael Warnock has a 51% chance of winning. Out of all the competitive races that we have this year, with Democrats holding the seat right now, Georgia is probably the reddest state. Georgia has had a very long Republican voting history. Only in 2020 did it flip in favor of the Democrats on both the Senate and the presidential level. And so Raphael Warnock really should be losing this race if you had any other Republican running besides Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is tanking the GOP's chances in this race. And if you look at the forecast over time in Georgia, at one point in time, Herschel Walker had a 62% chance of winning simply because he was a Republican. And he has basically since blown that advantage. So right now, Georgia is so competitive that Democrats are actually favored to win. And so looking at the map overall right now, I'm going to fill in some of the lean states for both parties: North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. I mean, these races are going to be more competitive than they should be, but in the end, Democrats are probably not going to win, and Democrats are going to win in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. And I mean, based on just how well Mark Kelly's doing right now, I'm going to have Arizona as a lean state as well. And so you have 49 seats for both parties. Republicans have to win both of them. Democrats only have to win one. And so basically, this makes it so that the math is much more favorable right now to Democrats than it is for Republicans. And so just to drive home this point a little bit more, I'm going to finish off this video by looking at the latest polls conducted by the Trafalgar group. So Trafalgar, along with Rasmussen reports, are known for being two of the most right-wing pollsters in the country. These were Trump's favorite pollsters during his presidency because they were the only ones that showed Donald Trump in the positives in terms of his approval. And if you look at their four latest polls conducted just a couple of days ago, Michael Bennet leads by 6% in Colorado, Vance by 5% in Ohio, Fetterman by 5% in Pennsylvania, and Laxalt by 2% in Nevada. So looking at the Colorado poll, it is obviously more conservative than the other ones that we've seen, but Bennett winning by 6% according to a Trafalgar poll basically guarantees the Democrats are going to hold on to the state. Of course, Michael Bennet was almost always going to win, but this poll just reaffirms the fact that Michael Bennet is probably not going to outperform expectations by that much. In the state of Ohio, Democrats still lead by a margin of 1% with Tim Ryan challenging J.D. Vance. If you look at the latest poll here, Vance is only up by 5% according to Trafalgar, so it is by far the most conservative poll we've seen from the state. Even Emerson only had Vance up by 3%, but Vance up by 5% in a Trafalgar poll is pretty abysmal for the Republican Party. I mean, really, he should be winning by at least double digits according to this pollster. In Pennsylvania, Democrats lead here by a margin of 5%. I mean, for Trafalgar in Pennsylvania, this is a pretty big deal, and John Fetterman overall still leads by 10.4% if you look at the polling average. So this Trafalgar poll basically guarantees that Democrats are going to win here. Now, of course, Pennsylvania is going to be one of those watch races for a very long time. It's going to be one of the most competitive and one of the most important ones. You cannot take for granted that Fetterman is going to win, but as of right now, his numbers are just so good that it would be almost impossible for him to lose. And finally, in Nevada, Adam Laxalt does lead by 2%, so Nevada, I believe, is going to be the closest race that we have this year, but Laxalt leading by 2% really is not that big of a deal for Democrats. It should not be that worrying, even though of course, Republicans are leading. If you look at the 2018 race between Jackie Rosen and Dean Heller, Heller was up by 3% according to the final Trafalgar poll, but of course, Jackie Rosen won by 5% in 2018. So looking at the 2022 poll, I think that Democrats are not in as good a position in Nevada as they are in states like Pennsylvania or Arizona, but Catholic Cortez-Masto still stands a very good chance, and just because of that, 2022 is not going to be a red wave year. So, of course, I'm not saying that Democrats are going to win the Senate. I don't believe that they're going to win by any sort of big margin, but I think that they stand a very good chance. And again, just because of that, Republicans are not going to see the red wave that they want. If you look at races like we saw in 2010, 2014, and 2018, it was almost guaranteed that the opposite party was going to win the House. But as of right now, Democrats still have a 22% chance at holding on to control of the lower chamber. And if we look at the Senate chamber, I mean, we're seeing a much better numbers for the Democrats overall. If you look at the Senate forecast based on polls alone, Democrats have an 80% chance at winning the majority. And of course, if you look at the two recent special elections, Democrats outperformed the pollings in those states in both of those races. So right now, Democrats are doing much better than they should be, and so just because of that, of course, 2022 is not going to be a red wave year. And I've said that many times in this video, but that basically is the point. I think the Republicans are still going to do much better than before, but they're not going to see that big flip in Congress that they were hoping for. So looking at the map right now, it is still very even. Democrats and Republicans still both stand a very good chance, but as of right now, I think the Democratic Party should be very happy about where they are at. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you're trying to comment down below which party you think will win and whether or not you think 2022 is going to be a red wave year. Also, subscribe to my channel if you have not. I have channel memberships for just 99 cents per month, so consider getting one of those for extra perks on this channel leading up to the midterms in November. And so thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.